All right, we, of course, are studying history and geography. We're at the Conquest of Canaan portion. So we're going to do just a slight bit of review, recap, and move into that Conquest of Canaan. So maybe you want to open up to Numbers, Deuteronomy. Will be in that range in just a moment. It's very good to see everyone. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Dear God, we thank you for the day, for the blessings of this day, for the peacefulness of this morning to be able to be here. We thank you for the Bible, for the record of your people in ancient times and the work that you did among them to lead them into the promised land. We thank you that we have a record of your great power and how it gives us confidence in you as the true Almighty God. We thank you that we can read about your people and the challenges they faced and how that they, in trusting in you, overcame and accomplished great things in life. We pray that we will trust in you as that ancient generation did, and help us to have hearts and minds that are open to your truth and to be encouraged in serving you. Bless each one who is here. Bless us all as we study together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Conquest of Canaan, and you remember that we looked at the defeat of the two kings on the east side of the Jordan, both Sihon and Og, how the Israelites took their territory, and then also the troubles that the Israelites had in the plain of Moab. You can see the northern portion of the Dead Sea there, Jericho on the west side of the Jordan. And then the plains of Moab is more that flatter area on the east, northeast side. But here you've got the children of Israel that are camped out in that area in the plains of Moab. And this is when the 2.5 tribes approach Moses and say, we want to take territory over here. And of course, that is because they found that territory to be a good territory for their families, their flocks and things to settle in. On the eastern side of the Jordan, you have, of course, Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh settling further to the north there. And you can see a little bit on the, I guess, a satellite imagery there, how that area with the greener portions, those darker portions, how it is a more fertile area compared to the deserts that they had been wandering in over that wilderness wandering. But let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy chapter 7. And let's note about Moses' admonition, of course directed by God, of what they were to do when they went into the land. So Deuteronomy 7, let's read verses 1 through 6. Deuteronomy 7, 1 through 6. Go ahead, Caesar.
When the Lord your God brings you into the land which you possess, and has cast out many nations before you, the Hittites, Pelees, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them, nor shall you make marriage with them. You shall not give your daughter to their sons, nor take their daughter for your son, for they will turn your sons away from following me, and serve other gods. So the anger of the Lord will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly. But this you shall deal with them. You shall destroy their altars and break down their sacred pillar, and cut down their wooden image, and burn their carved image with fire. For you are a holy people to the Lord, to God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the people on the face of the earth.
All right. So this is question 2 on page 17 in the workbook there. One of the things you notice here is this list of nations, and you can kind of see those on the map, their relative general area. There's a variety of them, of course, here. But to the point of that question, the reasons why God told them to go in and to destroy these people. What's the reason for that? What's the concern here?
They want to leave the God, the guide and protect them. They want to walk away and turn away into the world, the image, idols, and everything else.
Yeah, Hank?
Well, just like Caesar was saying, they'll turn your sons, daughters, all your family against you and make them help. They will serve their God, not him.
Okay, and how would that happen? How would they turn their sons and daughters away from God, Carter? Yeah, marriage. So God's telling them, you go into this land, there's a certain culture that's present in that land, and they are idolaters. If you go in and you don't purge the land of those people, well, over time, your people and their people will be comfortable. They'll begin to intermarry. And where do we read about that happening in the Bible before? The sons of God and the daughters of men. Mike?
I was going to say Genesis.
Yeah, Genesis chapter 6, it opens up with how there's this mixture between godly people and ungodly people, and the influence went to ungodliness, and it got so bad that the world ended up being destroyed in the flood. And so he's telling his people, you go in there, you have to get rid of the people, get rid of these idolaters, and get rid of the idolatrous items that are there. Get rid of those idols, the altars that are in there. Destroy all that. Purge all of that out of there so that you are not taken away. You're not influenced. As time goes by, those new generations come along, that they turn from God and end up in idolatry. Mike?
I think human nature is when things are going bad, I want to try something that seems to be working and they're not actually doing. Like, if something's going wrong in my life, and then I look at this guy who's an adulterer, and everything seems to be going right with his, I might be willing to try what he's trying to make my life a little bit better. So there's always this temptation to kind of go to something else away from God because it seems to be better.
When you get down into the history of Israel later, on many occasions, the kings in particular would turn to the foreign idols thinking, well, these guys have power, and so we want to gain their favor as well, so we'll be powerful. So to your point, that is a great danger. And just simply the idea of the influence, the things you're around are going to influence you. And when you talk about marriage, you talk about family, well, that's going to have the greatest impact and influence on you. You fast forward again to Solomon. He married all these foreign women, and they turned his heart away from God. And God could see that's a very serious danger. So when you go in, the charge is purge that out of the land. For us, you make the application maybe in two different ways. One would be within the church. Within the church, we can't have influences among us that are going to take us away. And so the New Testament deals with that. There are people that you mark. There are people you withdraw from so that you don't have that influence. That needs to be purged. As 1 Corinthians chapter 5 says, purge out the old leaven, right? So we need to do that. And then, of course, within our own families, we need to be very careful, very aware what kind of influences are there in the family. Very often you look at a family who are Christians, and the children unfortunately, are not as strong as the parents. If you take a first generation Christians and you go to the second generation that they've raised, very often they're not as strong. And then that third generation, very rarely are they Christians, because the first ones appreciate it. Just like in Joshua, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but it happens. And so this is why you do it. You get rid of that. And here, I think it's safe to say, the way it's described in Deuteronomy 7, essentially, he's telling them, you have a scorched earth policy. You go in and you completely obliterate all of that so that it's not there as an entrapment, a danger for you, for your family as the generations go by. Any other thoughts on that? Elaine?
Is there absolutely no chance that they could have been influenced generally?
Well, I won't say absolutely no chance, but God didn't see it happening that way. God saw it as, you go in, if you've got this idolatry around you, it's going to ensnare you. That's generally how things go. So you look at that, tells them you've got all these people, and he names the certain tribes there, the Girgashites, the Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, and all that. But it also mentions the Canaanites there. Now, the Canaanites were a tribe, but they were also large enough that it sort of became the name for everyone. So it's I think of it like this. Yankee, what's a Yankee? Okay, Elaine raised her hand. Right, yeah. What's a Yankee? Okay. If you're in Britain, what's a Yankee? All Americans. See, our perspective, a Yankee's somebody from up north. You go into a foreign land and, they call us Yanks, all of us. Think of it that way. Within Canaan, the Canaanites were a particular people from a particular region. But outside that area, you would think of it, well, Canaanites, it's just kind of referring to all of them because it's the land of Canaan. So just think of it that way. The Amorites, they were considered to be the largest and strongest group. They may have been the ones who were exerting influence in Egypt during the time of Joseph. And so there was a different relationship there. And then when they went out of power, and the Israelites then again were looked down upon and in disfavor at that time. But the Hittites, they were once thought to be an imaginary people. Does anybody know the story of the Hittites and all of that, the critics? The Hittites, before I think it was 1876, the critics of the Bible said there's no such thing as Hittites. There's no evidence for any Hittites. Nobody knows anything about any Hittites whatsoever. And so the Bible is inaccurate. You can't trust it. It's just a myth that the Hebrews have come up with. Well, around the mid-1870s, there was an archaeological discovery over there, and they actually stumbled upon one of the largest library collections of writings that was in the Hittite capital. And now, at this time, and I want to say for several decades now, people can go to college and get a PhD in Hittite studies. There's so much information out there. It's become its own specialty. And so, again, the Bible's just been proved to be true. Who do you know that was a Hittite in the Bible? He's a pretty famous guy. Uriah, right? Uriah the Hittite. I think he's the one we're most familiar with. But then it also talks about, it's not mentioned particularly in here, but there were giants in the land. Numbers 13, the Anakim and so on. Evidently, they were a smaller group of people who didn't have a great deal of influence, but there were giants. Remember when they went to spy out the land? They said we're but grasshoppers in their eyes when they saw these people. It's believed that Goliath was one of those people that was kind of at the end of their existence in the land. Goliath being a giant, 9.5, 10 feet tall. So that's what they're going into. They're going into this land facing these various groups that God says you go in there and you get rid of them because they're idolaters, get rid of their altars, get rid of all that's going to tend to pull you away. And so you are to be a holy people. Now, people they were not to go after, in Deuteronomy chapter 2 in particular, if you back up there real quick, they were not to go after the Moabites or the Ammonites. And why were they not to go after the Moabites and the Ammonites? Sort of give it away on the screen here, but what's the issue? Bill?
They were descendants of Lot, which made them distant relations to the people of Israel.
Right. And they also weren't supposed to go after the Edomites, the ones further to the south. And why was that? Who were the Edomites? Where'd they come from? Esau, right? They're descendants of Esau. And so God said that you don't go after them. I've given this territory to them. And so you leave them alone. But the rest of them, you go in and you get rid of out of the land. Now, that brings us to Deuteronomy chapter 34. Let's go there. Deuteronomy 34. And I would like us to read verses 1 through 7, please. Deuteronomy 34, 1 through 7. Who will grab that for us? Go ahead, Philip.
Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim, and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the south, and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to him, This is the land of which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over it. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth-peor. But no one knows his grave to this day. What?
One more.
Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished.
Okay, so a couple things. Mount Nebo, I've got it marked here on this. Jericho is to the east. Again, the northern part of the Dead Sea. Just to the northeast of that, basically directly straight up on the picture that we've got there. That dark part.
It's flashing.
Thank you for catching that.
There it goes.
All right. So, northern part of that Dead Sea, you go straight up on the picture there. That dark part is Jericho. You can see where the white arrow is pointing to what people have identified in modern times as Mount Nebo. So somewhere in that area, right? We do know they were somewhere in this area. Moses goes up on this high mountain. Question number 10, I think it is, in the workbook there. How tall do you think Mount Nebo is? Anybody get an answer on that? Thinks it's about 2,600 feet or so. If this is where it is. But this is the view from Mount Nebo. That in the bottom, the foreground here, you've got the Mount Nebo. This is where tourists go. They can check it out. There's little plaques and everything. And it's known, this is in the modern country of Jordan. It's actually known as Mount of Moses, I think is what they maybe call it now. But you can go there, and looking east, you can see Jericho. See across the plains of Moab, you can see the city of Jericho. You can see the Judean hills there in the far distant background. This is a little bit different view of it here. Mount Nebo's down in the foreground here. But Moses goes up there, and he goes up there, of course, and the Lord shows him all this territory. Going to back up there. He shows him this territory. You do have a wide view, but it says that he showed him the Western Sea, showed him as far north as Dan in that territory. And so there's probably something else happening than just a man standing and looking. And God is allowing him, somehow empowering him to see this land. But when he's up there, of course, he dies. Why does he die?
He didn't get God the glory on one of the occasions of striking the rock and said, speak to it. And his frustration got the better of him. So that kept him from being able to enter into the land. But I think also it's just time for Joshua to kind of take over the lead of the reins of the nation. It's a good time, a good transition.
Why do the majority of people in this world die?
Old age.
It's old age. That's not Moses. Even though he's 120 years old, he didn't die because of old age. It very specifically says there, you know, his eyes were not dimmed or his natural vigor diminished. Anybody who knows, Bonnie visiting her father, my mother at 90 years old. People get up in age, their natural vigor diminishes. It goes away, and sometimes precipitously. Moses, at 120, he was as strong and as lively and as vigorous as he was at 80 when he went to get them out, as he was at 40, if you will, when he went off into the desert. He was in good health, but he was not going to be permitted to enter into this promised land. And for the reasons that Mike cites, Joshua's the one who's going to lead them in there. And so he dies up on that mountain, and what does the Lord do with him?
Right.
He takes him and buries him where nobody is able to know where that body is. Why do you suppose he did that?
It would be a memorial to him to this day. Even to this day, the Muslims have an area, they say that's where he's buried, and they do a pilgrimage there to this day.
Yeah. You already see Mount Nebo in and of itself is a tourist spot with markers and plaques and all that kind of stuff. Just imagine if they actually knew where Moses was. Of course, they've got a place. It's not, but they've got a place. But Moses would have become an idol for the children of Israel. It would have been a real problem.
Well, it would also create conflict, like they do right now in that part of the country. One says, "Oh, this is our area." No, this is our area. They still be fighting for this.
Because this is where Moses' body has decayed. Hey, we're going to kill you because we want control of it. It would have been a very real problem. And so he takes him and he buries him off. Now, the people mourned for Moses, of course, and rightly so, because he was a great man. In spite of whatever faults and failings he had, he was a great man, and he's honored in the Bible as being a great man, both Old and New Testament. And so we don't want to diminish anything about him, but he was just a man. And so it's time for him to leave the stage, so to speak, and for another Joshua to enter in and to lead those people into that land of Canaan. I just want to make note in Deuteronomy 34, verse 8, it says that they are still there in the plains of Moab, and they mourn him there for 30 days. So they've been in this plains of Moab for some time with all the various things unfolding, Balak and Balaam and all of that. So they've been encamped around here for a good little while. And when they're encamped around here, people would know that they're there. And they would have some understanding of why they were there. But we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But I want us to notice that as they're getting ready to go into this land, that Joshua is encouraged by God. Let's read Joshua chapter 1, and let's read here. Let's go ahead and get verses 1 through 9. Joshua 1, 1 through 9. Who will grab that for us? Philip.
After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage. For to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe and do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
All right, so the Lord is encouraging him here, telling him, here's what you're going to do. Go in and divide the land among the people. Why do you suppose the Lord's doing this with Joshua? Why is he talking to him?
Transition is happening. A generational transition is happening. You have Joshua much younger than Moses. You have the people who are behind in the nation that are much younger than the ones who wandered out in the wilderness and died out there. So a whole generation is kind of coming along now. And Joshua probably is feeling the pressure of, now we're here, what do I do now? So he needs that encouragement to let him know, I'm with you. This is my doing. You're my guy.
Okay. Remember the last time they were on the verge of going in, that Joshua was in that group that went out and spied it out and came back, and the people just totally collapsed in their will to go in. And he's encouraging him here, hey, you're going to do it. You're going to go in. These people have been a rebellious people. And he knows there's a long, hard road ahead going in and conquering that land. Even though God was with them, it didn't mean they're just going to go in, the people are just going to run. And, the people are going to fight for their homes, for their families, all of the stuff they've got going on there. And so he needs this encouragement facing this great campaign, this great war that's about to take place. Mike, something else?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, this idea that he tells Joshua, he tells him, Moses, my servant, is dead. Because Joshua's still kind of feeling that pain of missing Moses, but he's saying, look, he's dead, it's time to move on. We can't just stay right where we are. We've got to move on. But this command of be strong and courageous throughout the scriptures, it is the number one command that we find for God's people, even in the New Testament. You find it all throughout. It's the one that shows up the most of any of them. Be strong, be courageous, we got this.
Yeah, Mike, Hank.
That land is no small land. It's not just Israel we know today. It's much larger. It's Syria, it's Lebanon, it's I guess what else? It's quite large.
Yeah, it goes far north, as he mentioned here, up to the river Euphrates, and down south into a portion of the Sinai Peninsula. And so, it's a large territory filled with people who have the walled cities, as we talked about before. They're ready to fight and to take on Israel. And so this is a huge task that's ahead of them. Hank and then Philip.
Those walled cities weren't just like you build a wall around your house.
Right. We'll check that in just 1 second. Philip.
Like you were saying before, Moses was a great man. And for Joshua to come in on the heels of him, that had to be very intimidating for Joshua. To also know that how close God and Moses were. So I think it's very important also that God told Joshua, as I was with Moses, I will be with you.
Right, good point, because Moses and the Lord had a very intimate relationship, and Joshua's being assured, I'm with you too. And so it's a great encouragement to him as they are standing on the edge of this great war that they're about to embark upon. So you've got the area of Jericho there. You got the plains of Moab over to the east. Joshua chapter 2, let's look at verses 9 through 11. And just notice what it says here. So, Joshua 2, 9 to 11, then I'll make some comments about the image that's up here. Who's got this? Go ahead, Carter.
He says to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath.
All right. Of course, this is Rahab talking to the two spies that Joshua sent to spy out Jericho in particular. On the foreground here, where it's marked Jericho, that little kind of oval type shape is ancient Jericho. They've excavated it. They've confirmed this is it. They found the walls of the city and so on. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But the point is, you can see how being in Jericho, they could look across and know that the Israelites were over there. And again, you're talking about 1.5 million to 2 million people that are over just on the other side of that river Jordan. If there's maybe some hills kind of in the way, they would at least know that those people are there, maybe by campfires and things like that. But they could tell Israel was there, and it was intimidating to them. They heard what happened with Sihon and Og and what had happened 40 years before, crossing the Red Sea, all those things. And so you can imagine these people in Jericho there, the anxiety building up in them. She's expressing that to these spies. We're petrified of what we know is coming here. And one of the things, when you measure Jericho, like this seems really small. And in our scale, it is really small. But the thing we have to remember about ancient cities is very often a large portion of the inhabitants of the city actually lived outside the city walls. It was just in times of danger, times of war, that the people would go inside those walls for the protection, but that was meant to be just temporary. And so don't think of this as this is all the inhabitants, this is where everybody lived inside those walls. Because just like today, you may live in a place where you're actually not in the city limits. You know, a lot of people with the address are outside the city, but then there is the core city where that's actually the city proper, if you will. Hank?
Even to this day, if you go in that part of the region, it's still set up like that. The elders will live in a walled area. I went into those cities and met with the elders, and they have a massive compound, we would call it. And it's all walled in, and your direct families are in there, but everybody that works for them is outside of the city. Mm-hmm. It's still like that.
Yeah, Mike?
I'd like to point out also that the story that she tells specifically how they came out of Egypt 40 years ago shows that They knew who they were messing with. They knew who these people were. They had plenty of time to react to this. They chose to stay and stand their ground wherever they are. We see that throughout the whole campaign. These people refused to move. They refused to repent back to God and follow Him. Instead, they choose other gods. They choose to stay where they are. So this is, whenever we talk about, to Lane's point about, well, could they have changed? For 40 years, they've heard these stories over and over and over. They know who these people are.
Right. And we don't have the specifics of it, but God was still dealing with the Gentiles. And He had told Abraham, look, the cup of iniquity is not full yet. But now when we get to Joshua, that cup of iniquity is full. They've hit that point of no return. And there are some individuals like Rahab who acknowledge the one true God. And she's eventually is integrated into Israel. In fact, into the line of David. So there were some people who repented, who woke up, who turned to God, but as a society as a whole, they did not do that. And so God's going to purge them out of this. But here they are in Jericho. They know this is about to happen. They're full of fear because of that. The Israelites crossed the Jordan. Let's go to Joshua chapter 3. And let's read verses 14 through 17. Joshua 3, 14 to 17, where they actually cross. Who's got this? John?
So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan, the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. The waters coming down from above stood up and rose up in a heap very far away. At Adam, the city that is beside Zareth, and those flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off. And the people passed over the opposite Jericho. Now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan.
Okay, so just imagine this large horde of people. This isn't just the army crossing over. It's the entire nation that's with them that crosses over. So they go from the plains of Moab there in the east, and they cross over that Jordan, and they're in the plain that's just below Jericho there. So they cross over, and it says in Joshua chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, that all the men are circumcised. Why would that be a shocking thing? What's going on here?
When you're on the move, looking downtime you would have to have for that.
Okay, what do we know about circumcision from Deuteronomy chapter 34? Or Genesis 34, rather. The men are sore, recovery afterward. Levi and Simeon, they took advantage of that. They slaughtered the men of Shechem. And so basically what you have here is they cross over Jordan, which is a natural barrier, an element of protection. They've left that behind them. They've got the Jordan behind them. They have Jericho in front of them. They have the Salt Sea down to the south of them. And they've basically handicapped all their men, all their fighting age men. They're all handicapped. And they have to have time to recover. What would that take to do that? Trent?
It was also a show of faith.
Completely. Exactly. That tells you what kind of men these were. That they were willing to do that, knowing that they would be seriously vulnerable to attack for several days. If the enemy decided to attack, those men are physically not in shape really to do much fighting. And so this is a great act of faith on their part as they are in enemy territory now and about to launch into this campaign. Any other thoughts there? John?
Yeah, that's a a lesson throughout the history of the Bible where God calls on his people to step out and show extreme faith and follow what I told you to do, even though it may not make sense. And it follows all the way up to us today, and the things that we're called out to do to separate ourselves from that world of sin and be baptized and follow God exactly. Well, that may not make sense to us. Why do we have to be dunked in water and the other things that we're called on to do? But God has always asked his people to step out and show great faith and follow.
Yeah. Why weren't they circumcised when they were still on the other side of Jordan? God could have told them to do that and then cross over. But to Trent's point, to John's point, this is a great act of faith that's being manifest among the nation here. Mike?
Shouldn't they have been circumcised whenever they were babies?
And when you read the whole account, they, in the desert, they neglected to do this. And so now they're doing it. And basically what you have in Joshua chapter 5 is a renewal of the covenant. And that is seen in this circumcision, that they're renewing this covenant, that this new generation's committed themselves to following the law of Moses, honoring God. And that follows through with that sign of the covenant. All right, so they're going to conquer Jericho. Joshua chapter 6, of course, gives that account. We're not going to read through all of this. From what I understand, there is about a 7-acre area inside of those walls. Again, most of the people probably living outside of that, but they retreat inside during the time of war. And to Hank's point, the walls were not just walls. Not just one. Here you can see there's in the bottom right of the image here, you've got really a double wall with earth in between that helps to stabilize them and everything. But you've got this here because they wanted that protection from enemy attack. It was very hard in ancient times, particularly before gunpowder was invented, to breach these walls. This is a fortress here. And it would be very hard to attack that. And usually what ended up happening in ancient times is very often they would end up in a siege and basically try to starve the people out inside because of how difficult it was to get in. Now, there are times when people breached the walls. They were able to do that. But you think about Israel, they're not prepared for siege warfare, really. And they're not prepared to take these walls down. But we know that God steps in and those walls fall out. And when you go over there, this is a picture kind of that, at least a part of the ancient Jericho where they've dug out. They found the walls. They found where things had been burned, because after they took the city, it says that they burned the city. They found where they believe the walls fell out when they went and attacked it. And so the archaeology, it confirms what is written in Joshua chapter 6 here. Any other thoughts there? All right, so they go in. They take the city of Jericho, and then they have to look west. And where do they go next? Okay, Ai, Joshua chapter 7, what happens there? Joshua chapter 7.
Observe that they should be fairly easy to take. They don't need to all go down there, so they send out a small number of attacks.
And ends up what?
Some people, they're overcome and 36 people are killed. They have to come back. So
very discouraged. And Joshua's distraught about that, and the Lord rebukes him. You got a problem in Israel. It's not a problem with the enemy. It's an internal problem here. And so they, of course, then discover Achan and what he had done. He and his family are killed, and then they're able to move forward, and they take Ai, and they have a victory there. And then they go on and they attack Bethel as well. This is a little bit closer picture of it. So they go from Jericho down there after they cross the Jordan. They go up into the hill country. They take Ai, they take Bethel, and after they take those, they go to, and I'm going to skip that right now, the taking of Ai. But they go to Ebal and Gerizim or Gerizim, and what happens there at this place? Joshua 8, verse 33. Joshua 8:33. Let's go ahead and read that. Who's got that? Go ahead, John.
And all Israel, sojourner as well as native born, with their elders and officers and their judges, stood on opposite sides of the ark before the Levitical priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, half of them in front of Mount Gerizim and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded at the first to bless the people of Israel.
Okay, so this is the mount of blessing, the mount of cursing. Shechem is in between. It's a north-south orientation, if you will. Ebal to the north, Gerizim to the south, Shechem down in between again in the valley. The various tribes were told where they were to be, which mountain they were to be on. They call out the blessings, they call out the cursings here. This is a picture of it from the side. And you can see the various tribes, which side they went on. Exactly where they were relative to each other, don't know. But they're there, and they're doing this in fulfillment of what the Lord had said to them. Any thoughts about them going into the land and doing this? Mike?
I think, first of all, the location of Shechem is dead in the middle of all of that hostile territory. And then also, it just shows how far they've come as a nation. In their trust in God to be able to do this where they're doing it. And it also, to me, whenever I see this, it shows a great respect that they have for God. Just obeying Him, taking the time out to work this.
Right. And I know this is small, a little bit harder to see, but where that white arrow is that Ai Bethel area, and that little gray line that goes up is where Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal are, Shechem up in that area. And so that's a little bit closer up. They go up there into that territory. To Mike's point, it's in the middle of Canaan, essentially. And they're there, and they're, as a people, divided on two separate mountains and engaged in this religious activity. They're not on a war footing necessarily right here. And it shows their great faith again that they go up as a people, as a whole, to this place. This isn't just the army going up there. This is the entire nation that goes up there and goes through this. But what it's doing, in a sense, is they're reviewing those blessings and cursings, which is going to encourage them, warn them, have them sober-minded in everything that's going on. But it is also, in a secondary sense, this is our land, and we're taking this land. And so it's a great bolstering activity for their psychology, their mood, and going and pressing forward on the rest of the campaign.
Was this nearby where God had promised Abraham the land when he's camped out at the open moor? Is this not the same
Yes.
spot?
Yes, it is. I'm glad you brought that out. Shechem is that territory, that area, the Oaks of Mamre, or I think that's down in Hebron. But this is where God made promises, and where Abraham first went in the land of Canaan itself. When he came down in Genesis chapter 12, it says that he went to this area of Shechem. And so this is a significant geographical location for the children of Israel going back in their history. All right, so they're going to conquer Canaan. Just had a double slides there. But they're going to go on in, and we're not going to take time to run through all of this. Oh, I know what that was. So they make that deal with the Gibeonites, right? The Gibeonites, they pretend like they're from far away, and they make a covenant. Then Joshua and them figure out, oh, wait a second, they're actually one of the people here. But they keep the covenant that they had agreed to, and they make the Gibeonites slaves. The Gibeonites then are attacked by Adonai-Zedek, the king of Jerusalem. He gets an alliance of people together. These down to the south, you can see, Hebron, Lachish, Eglon, those various cities there. He gets all those guys together to go and attack the Gibeonites to punish them in part, also try to bring them back into the fold. But the Gibeonites send a message to Israel that is now camped down at Gilgal. So they're back down in the Jordan Valley. That's where their main camp. It seems that they go out, they fight, they return here. But they're down there, and Joshua does essentially a forced march overnight, surprises these enemies, protects the Gibeonites, and then he goes on a southern campaign and obliterates these strongholds, because that's what's happening in this initial part of the war. Is Joshua and the army is hitting the strong points in the land to try to get rid of that major resistance in the land of Canaan. So they sweep through the south and take care of all those, and then they sweep through the north. Hazor is one of those places up north that they defeat. And by the way, Hazor, they found where it is, and it was about 200 acres inside of walls. So you think about Jericho, about 7 acres, and Hazor was a major stronghold in the north, about 200 acres inside the walls there. But they go through, they attack, they destroy these cities, they take control of the land, and then it is at a later time that when they are divided into their various territories in the land of Canaan, that the tribes are to finish eradicating the people that live there, the smaller villages and what points of resistance there would be, and the idolatry that's in the land. That's not the point of what Joshua's doing. Joshua with the army, hitting the strongholds, trying to get rid of the bulk of the fighting men, and then the individual tribes are to go in and to take control and cleanse out their areas. Any other thoughts there? All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up there. Next time, Lord willing, lesson number 5, and we'll get into the division of the land and everything that happens there.